it's quite a thing as an artist or composer to create something. It's quite another thing to turn around and have someone else reinterpret your own work 80 years later. And that's precisely what I did. When I was contacted by Ensemble for these times, they were seeking someone who had a good shot at being able to somehow interpret Picasso's monumental, amazing painting. That painting, for people who have stood in front of that painting in the museum in Spain, it's a deeply emotional, moving experience. This thing is an immense work. It's 11.5 feet tall, it's 25.5 feet wide, and it portrays a lot of the pain and suffering of the afternoon and the evening of the bombing of Guernica. And it's quite a humbling experience, too, because we have a monumental masterpiece of the 20th century that Picasso had created. And how does one translate that into music, take the visual image into music? It just so happens that I do often combine my own paintings with my own compositions. So I have that skill set, and I have a little bit of that ability to translate between the visual and the auditory. And that's one reason why I was asked to do this very special project for Ensemble for these times. So we start off with the painting. But in order to get to the point of the painting, we have to work backwards. We have to tell the whole story. And so that's precisely what we did. Guernica, that you'll hear tonight, is in 4 movements. The first movement is entitled Ultimate Betrayal, and it is the betrayal of the Francoists and the Nazis and the fascists of the Basque people. And they specifically sought to annihilate them. They had to break the morale of the Basque Republican government somehow, because it was a bit of a stalemate during the Spanish Civil War. And the Francoists knew that they were not going to be able to achieve what they wanted to achieve and push the Basque Republican out unless they could somehow break the morale of the Basques. And so they decided to bomb Guernica. And why Guernica? Well, Guernica is considered to be basically the cradle of the Basque race. It's the epicenter of all things Basque in that part of Spain. And so if you could eliminate Guernica, which they attempted to do, they destroyed 3/4 of the buildings in that town, and the other quarter were seriously damaged. There were 1,600 people who lost their lives, many of them being women and children. And it was done ostensibly under the umbrella of somehow Guernica was holding or providing refuge for the Basque army. And that's not the truth at all. But it was sought to become an example. So we started with the painting, compositional, and we worked backwards. So the very first movement was Ultimate Betrayal. The second movement is a portrayal of the market day, the marketplace in Guernica, because this bombing occurred on Monday, very late Monday afternoon, early Monday evening. And you've got to understand that Market Day is not only a commerce event in Guernica, it's a great social event. People from all around the countryside come and they bring their produce, they bring their animals, their livestock, they bring the things that they've made, they swap, they trade, they barter, but most of all, they have a great social time. And if you want to really break the spirit of people, you attack when they're least expecting it, and you also attack when it's got the greatest impact. And that's exactly what happened. So the second movement is actually a poem by a British author named Walter de la Mare. He wrote it in 1905, but it's so eerie and haunting, the fact that this poem mirrors the experience of what happened in Guernica on April 27th in 1937. We have all of the spectacle, all the joy, all the fun of the market day, and then things get very quiet and people inexplicably leave the marketplace as the stars begins to come out. The third movement, we have the eyewitness. And the eyewitness is the people themselves who were under attack in the late afternoon. And we hear this sung in Basque. We hear this in the Basque language. And the reason for this is because it's the language of the people, it's the heart language. The very first movement, where the ultimate betrayal occurred, we hear the languages of all the people who are involved. We hear, first of all, the Francoists asking in Spanish, "Will you help us destroy the Basque race?" And then the Germans, in German, say, "Yes, we can," and the Italians also say, "Yes, we can" as well. But in the first movement, we also hear a little bit of Latin, Kyrie eleison, Christe eleison, part of the Mass from the Catholic Church. Lord have mercy, Christ have mercy, the very cries that people would say as they were being bombed. But to get back to the third movement, we hear this all in Basque, and it's the cries of the women, the children, and the people asking for each other as they're huddling, hoping that they'll be able to survive this immense bombing. And the bombing was horrific. The bombing included these huge chemical bombs that were designed to destroy buildings structurally, but there's also incendiary bombs, which after they would hit, they would spread material and things would catch on fire and burn to the ground. There's also machine gun strafing. That kept the people from escaping while the bombing was occurring. So all of this leads up eventually then to the fourth movement, which is the interpretation of Picasso's painting itself. And in this movement, you'll hear all kinds of special sound effects being created by the violinists and cellists and the pianists, as well as the singer singing very passionately. But the interesting thing about the fourth movement is that it takes ideas and themes, just like you would take a story or tell a story from each of the movements and recombines it and continues to develop it. So again, it was a very amazing process for this little bit over this last year to be working on this piece for this ensemble. And it takes an entire village to create a work. I received assistance from the Basque delegation to the United States in New York City in help with the translation of the Basque and the pronunciation of the Basque. And then also, very importantly, I received help from Ensemble for These Times, where they provided me some good advice and insights as to how things could be shaped or improved as we went along the way. I was able to share drafts. But what you'll hear tonight is the product of a lot of labor and a lot of love by a lot of people, marking a very important historic event towards the end of the Spanish Civil War, just prior to the beginning of World War II. So again, thank you very much for coming out this evening, and we hope that you have a very good experience tonight, but also that you take to heart all the wonderful cultural things that you're going to experience this evening. Thank you.